Okay, so we're going to start with exercise 224 today, and also I gave you your assignment 204s today as well. The two are interrelated, though it's going to take you a couple days before you're really ready to do the lighting stuff. The truth is, now's when stuff starts to get really fun in rendering, because we get to put lights in. We can do the things that people want to do. I mean, the one render that's the hardest to do by hand is a night render, to get accurate lighting and that sort of thing. Yeah. It's also the coolest one to do. So learning this technique in V-Ray will ultimately give you some really good renderings. It's also the point in the semester where network rendering is going to start to be very valuable. I haven't quite finished all of that side, getting them their own separate Q drive location. This whole side is good. You can type in any of the computer names from ET103-1 through ET103-20. That group is all set to go. So if you manually type in those names as opposed to finding the servers, there's a bunch of vacant ones here, so you can harness them today quite nicely. So I'll walk you through that again, because when you start doing lighting, the more horsepower you have, the better. So in terms of assignment 204, excuse me, and also for what you're going to be doing today, it's important to look at your model, look at your design thus far, and think about two locations where a light fixture would be desirable. One is going to be an interior location, one is going to be an exterior location. These two fixtures that you're going to design and build need to be of your own design. You can theoretically, like, let's say you saw a fixture that you like and you want to kind of interpret it and copy it. By all means, you can borrow something that somebody else has designed. Don't go to Flying Architecture and download one of their lights and use that, because I will be able to tell that it's not yours, right? And you won't get credit for it. So make sure you actually do your own light. We will talk at length about lights, lighting, how you do different materials, how do you do a lamp shade, those kinds of things. It will take time to go through it. We're going to talk about the basics today. We will continue with this and kind of doing night renderings and that sort of thing in future classes. So today is all about understanding lights in general, understanding how do you start this process. Next class we will do the exterior lights, but we'll still do, we're going to do the interior light, but we'll do it during the daytime, so we're not going to make it night just yet. Then we'll move into doing interior and exterior at night. So it's a snowball process. You'll learn a lot about lighting through that process as we go forward. But today we need kind of the basic setup before we can really get started. So on the website, I know it's running slow, I'm sorry. Under exercise 224, there is a place where you can download the basic night scene VisOpt file. I believe it's also on the Q drive. And so let me just double check that it is there as well. Under VisOpt setting, basic night scene VisOpt. So it's on the Q drive, so you don't actually have to download it as well. So what that means is it's a bunch of settings that I've already set up for you in the rendering process. So there's still some settings we need to change, but it gets you starting to get there. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, in the V-Ray toolbar, I have the options button that we've been used to clicking on, right? And at the top, this is probably something you haven't seen before, but you're going to start using a lot more in the next couple class periods. And that is, you have the ability to save your V-Ray settings, save your current settings, and also to load other settings or to reload a set of settings. And when you start to work on your, switching from a day render to a night render, you're going to make a bunch of setting changes. So you're going to want to save a VisOpt file of these are the day settings, and then save one of these are the night settings. So you can switch back and forth between them. Okay. So what we're going to do is, in a brand new inch default unit Rhino file, we're going to open the V-Ray option editor here, and I'm going to load some V-Ray options, and that is a .visopt. And so I'm going to click on the little load button. And I'm going to go to the go to the Q drive, and I'll go to resources. I'm going to go to V-Ray VisOpt settings, and I'm going to pick basic night scene.visopt, and I will go ahead and say open, and it will take the default settings and replace them with some basic light settings. or it should do that for me. Okay. And so if we start to look in some of this stuff, actually before we do anything, I'm going to throw an infinite plane down on the ground, I hope. There it is. And let's do a quick render and see if it shows up nice and dark. Okay, that's a good sign. Okay, because this is a night render. Okay, so I've loaded in. First thing I do is I load in that VisOpt set of options. Then I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm going to build a little bit of structure for whatever this light is. All right, and this is very much in the early stages of things. We're figuring it out. So I'll do a wall. I don't know. Let's say at 8 feet, 1 foot, something like that. And we'll say that that wall is 8 feet high. There it is. Okay, there's a little wall. Maybe we'll put a little roof on it, depending. At 8, negative 6 feet. Okay, so whatever. It's just a little something that I can put my light fixture on. Okay, so I have this, and now I'm going to start to play around with lights and how that process works. So if I were to render this right now, right, I've left a little bit of ambient light in the scene, so as if there was a little bit of moonlight or something. So you can see here very well. You can barely see it. There's a little bit of a shadow that's cast. There's a little bit of background lighting, but we're going to concentrate on adding light now. And that's the advantage of loading that VisOpt, is those settings are already set for us. So we have just a whisker of light, but it's not fully realized just yet. Okay, so when I think about lighting, I have to do two different things. I have to model the geometry, the physical geometry that's going to hold the light, and I also have to install the V-Ray light that's going to cast the light. So there's two different things that I have to work on. The first thing that I have to do is to actually build the geometry of the light. And a lot of times it's easiest to build the geometry in a separate file. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the Start menu and open Rhino and open a brand new file. Large object, inches. And the first light I'm going to make is just a can light. So nothing particularly fancy. It's going to be recessed up in the ceiling of that little wall. So I'm going to start in the perspective view here, and I'm going to go ahead and model a basic can light. I'm going to do a circle to begin with. We'll start right here at the center. My radius is going to be 3 inches. So it's a 6-inch can light. I can do it smaller. It makes no difference. The size of this doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to show you how I'm going about it. Okay. Let's offset this by 1 inch, something like that, so I get the outer rim. Let me loft these two pieces together, so I end up with the surface. Let me switch into shaded mode so we can kind of see the surface. Let me extrude surface. I don't know, we'll go up 1/4 inch or so to make that little piece of trim, right? Now let's make a little bit of a cone up on top here. So let's see here, there's probably a cone that I can just use. Let's use this one, a truncated cone. It's going to ask me for the base of the truncated cone. Let me turn on quadrant snap. Oh, it's asking me for the center, so let me snap to the center here. Center. There we go. My diameter is going to be right there. We'll pull it up, oh, I don't know, 6 inches. And we'll say that this is, what is the radius at the top? We'll say it's 2 inches. There we go. Okay, so I build that little piece out. It's reasonable. Right now it's a solid shape, so let me go ahead and explode it. And I'm going to get rid of this for a second. And I'd like for my light itself, I need to model whatever the bulb looks like. I'm going to recess it back up in here a little bit higher. You could have it right at the surface. It's a matter of whatever you feel like doing. So I'll go ahead and recess it up in there a little bit. I'm going to pick an ellipsoid here, and I'm going to pick a by diameter. And oh, you know what? Let me. I need a curve that's up here a little bit. So let me do a quick intersection, just for accuracy purposes here. move vertically by, I don't know, 2 inches, something like that. I'm going to intersect these two together, give me that curve. I can get rid of this. It just gives me that curve to work from. All right, let me go back to my ellipsoid. I'm going to pick by diameter. So we'll say quadrant to quadrant. Right, I'm going to switch my views so that I can see kind of how thick that light bulb is. And let me turn off, for whatever reason, grid snap is on. Let's say I want it to hang down ½ inch or so. That works. So now I've created that little ellipsoid. I thought I did. One more time. I missed the opposite direction. That's my fault. There we go. Okay, so I have that little piece. I only need the bottom of it, so I could split it if I wanted to. For right now, it really doesn't make any difference, so we'll leave it like that. So if I look at this from the bottom, right, I have my trim. I have a little bit of a louver inside, and I have a light bulb. Right, this looks generically like a can light. Okay, I'm going to do a couple things to make this a little bit easier. I want the trim to hang down instead of be, so my 0, 0 is actually where the light would be. So let me move this whole object, move vertically by that much. Right, 0, 0 is at the center of this. And now I need to start thinking about materials for this particular object. Right, so let me get my layer straight and kind of reorganize here. I'm going to have a layer that's called can light, 6 inch, and then I'll have a sub layer, and let's call this trim, CL6 trim, and we'll call this CL6 dash bulb. And we'll call this CL6 dash housing. Okay, it doesn't matter what they're called, but I'm going to clean up everything now. So let's delete that layer. Right, and I'm going to start to move things. So I have the trim, that's going to go on the trim layer. So we'll change object layer to trim. And then this is the housing, so I'll change that to housing, change object layer. Whoops, I need to do the top here, change object layer. My bulb here is going to be on the bulb layer, change object layer. Perfect. Now it looks like I have 2 overlapping surfaces at the bottom, so let's get rid of that extra surface. And then I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the default layer altogether, because I'm going to bring this in as a block, so I want it to be as organized as possible. Okay, so I have a can light layer that contains the trim, the bulb, and the housing. Okay, so now I need materials for each one of those. Okay, so we'll go ahead and load up some materials. I'll go to materials here. I'll right click and I'll say load material, and I'm going to load them right off the Q drive. And so we'll go, I don't know, we'll go to metal, and we'll do like a brushed housing. Ah, let's do it in Chrome. No. Titanium.
Do you want the interior or the housing material to be reflective?
The housing material, I'm probably going to do something that's white. You could do something that's black. Doesn't really matter, because this isn't going to cast any actual light. This is just what it looks like. The light's going to be separate from it. Okay, so we'll put that. Let me apply to layer, and I'm going to put that on the trim. Say okay, we can preview it. A little shiny, that works. Let me go ahead and load material. I'm actually going to use a white porcelain for the inside, so it's just kind of a gloss white. You could pick something else, it's up to you. But I just kind of want a shiny white. There it is. Go ahead and say open. If we look at it, that's what it looks like. We can apply material to layer, and it's going to go to the housing. Okay. And then the last thing is the more complicated thing, and that is something that is a bulb. And so I've said thus far that we're going to actually install the lighting that's going to cast the light in the scene after we bring in the block, okay, because it's a separate object, it's a V-Ray thing that we're going to do. That being said, if we were to glance up at a light fixture, right, there is a bulb that we would see as a bright white object that's in there. Does that make sense? Right, if you look at a light bulb, you see the light bulb. In reality, in our world, that light bulb is providing the illumination, but you can also see it. Right? In V-Ray, a light source is invisible. We can't see where the light's coming from, but it starts at a point and casts the light. Okay? So we need to mimic what the light bulb looks like. And we're going to use a special type of material that's called an emissive material to do this. Okay? And so written out on your 224 handout, let me just see here. Step 3, it says you should create an emissive material, which is V-Ray 8.15. Okay, and I can create this by memory, but there are some settings that are useful. So I'm going to really quickly pull up V-Ray 8.15. Maybe not so really quickly. We will see. It's step 3. Okay, the reason that I wanted to bring this up is because I need this piece of information right there, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, this is designed to mimic what an incandescent light bulb looks like. If you were trying to do a fluorescent or an LED, the color would be different, but in this case we're going to mimic an incandescent. It is in the book, the same settings are there. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my Rhino. At my material here, and I'm going to right click on Scene Materials, and I'm going to say Create Material, and it's going to be a standard material, and I'm going to double click and rename it to be Light Bulb. Right? And for clarity purposes, if we had a variety of these, it doesn't hurt to actually name it like CL6 Light Bulb, because let's say you had a lot of different lights and you had different settings for the materials. Sometimes it's helpful to have different materials. So I'm going to say CL6 light bulb. Notice that all this is CL6. I'm trying to be consistent. And so I'll say OK. And I can jump back to my settings here. And we've got a couple things. Diffuse color of 155, 155, 155. I can do that. So let me jump back. Oops, wrong one. Diffuse color. Here's the color. I want RGB to be 155, 155, 155. Okay, so it sets it as kind of a mid-range gray color. Okay, I'm going to go back here, and this is why I was telling you I want to go through each of these. Right, my diffuse transparency should be 0, 0, 0. So let me go to my diffuse transparency 0, 0, 0, which it is. Okay, so that's good. The next part of this is I'm going to right-click on the light bulb, and I'm going to say Create Layer Emissive. Right, so we've done reflections before, we've done refractions before. We're going to create an emissive this time. Okay, and so it gives me a drawer for emissive, and I'm going to go back and reference these numbers again. The emissive color is going to be 200, 161, and 82. So here's my color, and it'll be 200, 161, and 82. Okay? And I know it's kind of an ugly yellow color, but once we turn it on, it's going to get a lot brighter. So I'll go ahead and say OK. There's my color. And let me double check over here. Oops, wrong thing. My emissive transparency is at 100, 100, 100. So this should be 100, 100, 100. And I'll go ahead and say OK. Okay? So I've followed those in this script: emissive color, emissive transparency, diffuse color, and diffuse transparency. I've just used those values, right, to build this material from scratch. And so here it is, and if we look at it and I go to preview it, we'll see that it looks kind of like a tannish object, right? Not all that exciting, okay? There is, however, the ability to transform what's called intensity, right? So let's bump the intensity up to 10 and let me preview it. Right? See how it starts to get a little bit brighter, right? It casts a little bit of a little bit of light on the checker pattern, right? I'm going to bump the intensity of this actually all the way up to 100, and when I preview it, it's going to be almost bright white. Okay, so the color is still there in the background, but that intensity is going to give us kind of a bright glow. I can adjust this value down the road, and this is why I said it was useful to have two different materials if you're using different light bulbs, because depending on how bright you want the light to show up, you can adjust that intensity value. Okay, so I have that. I need to apply this to the light bulb. So let me apply material to layer, and I'm going to apply it to the bulb. And I'll say OK. So now I have a trim, a bulb, and an interior housing color, right? If I were to render this, right, it probably wouldn't look that attractive, right? But we can kind of get a sense that, oh yeah, there's a little bit of light, and okay, it kind of works. Okay. Let me go ahead and close this, and I'm going to save it. And I will save it to my flash drive in my 224 folder, and I will call this can light 6. Okay, and I'll go ahead and click save. And now I can jump into my other Rhino file, right, this one, and I can bring that in as a block. Okay, so let me go ahead and go to Insert. I can go to Blocks, Insert Block Instance, and I'm going to browse for that can light. So let me go to 224. There's the can light. Say Open. I do want to make sure that I'm linking it as well. So when I click OK, I'm going to go right here, Embed and Link. That way I can go back and edit my can light if I didn't like it, and it will update in my scene. So I'll go ahead and say OK. And it comes in here, and I'm going to glue it right now to that corner of my little wall here. And then we need to do some basic transformations. Let me move this. Let me turn on ortho here. We'll move it 3 feet. Like that, and then we'll move it 4 feet this way so that it ends up being in the center. Okay? So if we're looking at it, looks pretty good. It's there. Now, there is a problem here. If we go to shaded mode, and we look at it, right? This light fixture hasn't been cut out. Okay? So I'm going to need to be able to trim that piece. It's not going to trim that well with a block. We'll go ahead and try it and see if it'll do it for us. I just did a trim, right? It's clean enough geometry to where it did actually do the trim, so yeah. I'm happy. Okay, so now if we were to look at this, I'm going to create an angle like this, and I were to render it in the night scene, right? We'd get a glow of that light bulb, right? And it looks like a can light, right? Remember, my intensity was set at 100, and I told you in the preview it was really white, but in reality it's a little bit yellow. It looks pretty good. But if we look at this scene from further away, right, let's say we're looking at it from right here, and I were to render it, right? There's a little bit of splotchy light on the back wall, but there's really not much other than the bulb itself. Okay? So we need in this scene to actually apply and cast some real light, some V-Ray light. Okay? So what I'm going to do now that I'm in the actual scene, so this is not done as the block, this has to be in the actual scene that you're going to render, I'm going to insert a V-Ray light. And because this is a can light, the type of light that I'm going to insert is going to be a spotlight. Okay? And so we'll go ahead and close this V-Ray progress window here, and I'm going to look here. We've previously been mostly working with this set of icons. Below that we have an icon that says sun, right? Rectangular light, point light, sphere light, dome light, spotlight. Okay? We're going to use spotlight. And so I'll go ahead and click on it. So it's going to ask me for the base of the cone, right? And so I'll come up over here, and I'm going to set the base of my cone for right now, right at the center of this light fixture. And I'm going to ultimately move this. Okay, so we'll get to that in just a second. And so there are a bunch of notes under item 4 for how you create this spotlight. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the base should be about 2 feet. So I'm going to press D for diameter, and then I'll say 2 feet. Right, and then I want the height to be 1 foot. So I'm looking for a 2-to-1 ratio in this. Okay, and that's just from practice. I think it tends to work out pretty well. So I switch my view into the right view, and I type 1 foot here, and it builds a cone for me. Okay. Now, if I were to render this right now, and I'm going to do it, okay, the light isn't going to do anything. Okay? And the reason that it doesn't do anything is because it's hidden inside this object. So I need my spotlight to actually be outside, not contained within any object. And so I'm going to move this vertically by a foot so that it's actually down below my light. Now, from a technical standpoint, the way I designed this little can light, I have 2 inches here. So I could push this cone back up. In reality, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that where it is, right? And I have my light. But now it's time to work with the light settings itself to get it right. Okay? If I were to render this right now, that it's outside here, right? I'm going to go to render it. Right? I get my light, but it's pretty intense. Okay? So now we need to work with the light itself. So I have the light selected, and we're going to adjust some of the properties of that light. Okay? So the first thing over here in my properties, I'm going to click on light. So previously we've done object, we've done material, but we haven't really gotten into light so much. Maybe with the sun you clicked on light. We're going to click on light. The light is enabled. Under intensity, we're going to change the color. So I'm going to change the color of the light. Right now it's pure white light. I want to make it a little bit more incandescent so that it has a little bit of yellow in it. And so I have that written as 255, 214, and 170. 255, 214, and 170. Okay? And this is the color, right? So I have the light itself selected, and then I've adjusted the color. Then under intensity, to me, the units as scalar make no sense, right? I understand wattage, right? Because I'm used to picking a 65 watt bulb or something like that. So I'm going to change the units into radiant power, which is a capital W, which is watts. Okay? And then I can adjust the intensity to match what I would think a bulb would be, right? So let's do 40 for now and see how that turns out. So I have radiant power as watts. I have it as 40 watts, right? Now I move down to my options. Okay? Linear decay is not what real light is, right? The actual type of decay is inverse square. I want to make sure that I have this written out. Yes, I do. Right? That's how light actually decays out. Right? If it's left as linear, you're not going to get the same shadowing effect. It's going to be very stark. Okay? So once I have decay set as inverse square, right, the bulk of the rest of these are perfectly fine. Okay? And so I'll go ahead and leave those as the defaults. And now we'll take a look at the render. Okay, so let me get my view set here. Something like that. Let me go ahead and hit my render button. Right? And I get a much better, softer pool of light shining down from my light. Okay? So this is what we're after. I have a light where I can see the bulb itself. Right? I have a spotlight shining down. In reality, if I had this, it would cast this sort of a shadow on the back wall. Right? If you've been in a house where they have can lights, this is exactly the shape that you would get on the wall. The closer it gets to the wall, the higher the shape is going to be. Right? But I can also change that by changing the shape of that cone. Right? Okay. So right now I have this cone set. What works really well is in a ratio of 2 to 1. If I change that ratio, it will change. So I'm going to do a couple more lights so you can see how this transitions here. Let me go ahead and right now this is on a default layer. Let me call this light 1. Normally I have just similar lights on similar layers. but I want to be able to illustrate this. Sorry. Alright, so let's change this onto light 1. Okay, and I will turn it off, but I'm going to use it to start where the light's coming from. It makes life a little bit easier. So I'm going to pick a spotlight again, and I'm going to pick, oh, it's not going to let me anyway. So I'll pick the center up here, same center point, right? And I'm going to make my diameter much smaller this time. So last time I'm going to do it at 1 foot. Okay, so we'll say diameter 1 foot. There it is. And my height, we'll keep the height at 1 foot. 1 foot. And let me move this down 1 foot. Okay, and now I can turn off one light. And actually, while I'm here, let me do yet one more light so that we can then render them consecutively and you can see. So I've got one that's smaller. Let me go to one that's even wider. So let's do a diameter of 3 feet and a height of 1 foot. Move this down by 1 foot. And let me change the object on this. And just for comparison purposes, I'm going to do one more. 4. And let me create a spotlight. And we'll do it really, really small. So a diameter of, I don't know, like 4 inches or something. And we'll do it as 1 foot there. Okay, so let me get back into the perspective view here so I can get kind of a nice setup. Something like that. We'll turn off all the lights. Let me make this active. Turn off all the lights. So we'll render the first one, which is the one you already saw. Good news is there's not a lot of complex geometry in this scene, so it's going to render pretty quick for us to see it. Okay, so there's our first kind of, with our 1 or 2 foot diameter spot cone and a 1 foot high cone. That's the shadow we get. Okay. If we switch to the wider cone and we render. Oh, I didn't change the settings on these. Okay, bear with me for just a second. I have to change the light settings
For each one?
for each one. Right. The truth is, once you get a light set and you like it, it's easier to copy and paste it than it is to redo it every time. So we're going to do 40 watts, inverse square. Color is 250. What is it? 214, 170. I'm going to remember these soon. 170. Okay. Okay. All right. Let me turn this off. Turn this one on. Watts, inverse square. $255, 214, and 170. 40 watts. And inverse square. All right. Sorry about that. We go back to having the second light on. So this is a broader light, and when we render it, it will be much higher on the wall and much more dispersed out here at the shadows. Right? If we go to the next one here, which is a little bit narrower, and we go to render, right, the shadow moves down the wall and it starts to be much more of a spotlight on the ground. Okay? If we turn that one off and move to this one that's very narrow, it's probably going to miss the wall altogether and put just a single spot on the floor. Right? Notice that we've got a single bright spot on the floor, but that it's reflecting back up onto the wall, right? And that's part of what makes V-Ray a really good rendering engine, is it calculates those reflections for us, okay? So in reality, this is like what a stage lighting would be, where you have a true spotlight, right? We're using the same spotlight, but we're changing the settings enough so that instead of getting that spotlight, we're really spreading out the light a great deal, and we're getting a pool of light rather than a direct spot, right? And so I've found in practice that the 2:1 ratio works really nice for this kind of a can light from the ceiling, right? Depending on what you're trying to do, you can adjust it though, and that's part of why I wanted to show you how that works, okay? So that's kind of the basic can light. I'm going to show you a light that would be on the wall or something with using a point light, which is a different kind of light. So you have to bear with me while we make some more geometry, but I think it's important for you to see that. Next class, I'll talk, or maybe in 2 classes, I'll talk about creating lampshades and semi-translucent materials, but I think it's a little bit too much today to do that as well. Okay, so bear with me for a second. We're going to build a second light that's on the wall here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to another Rhino file, and I'll pick large object inches again. And I'm going to work in the perspective view, and I'm going to make one that would attach to a wall, right? So let me start with a little box here. We'll start at 0, 0, and I don't know, we'll say this is at 4 inches, 5 inches, something like that, and we'll say that that's 6 inches tall, and then let's make a little. I'm completely making this up on the fly, so I have no idea what I'm actually making. Right, and so let's say this is a diameter of 2 inches and a height of I don't know, 1 inch, something like that. Move it. Midpoint, center, quadrant. There. Let's move this out 1 inch. Sorry, you guys just have to bear with me for a second while I go through this. Oops. Hold on. Negative 0.75 inches. There we go. Take this whole thing and let's move it vertically by, I don't know, 5 inches. Alright, works for me. I'm going to do a little bit of a trim, so I'm going to switch into wireframe, or I am in wireframe. I'm going to trim and trim, because I don't really want this extra stuff. That. Let's look at it in solid mode here. Okay, there we go. So you see I'm starting to build that out, right? Let's do one more little cylinder here. Doesn't matter. I'll drop this down like that. All right, let me explode this. Like that. Little piece there. Okay, so that works. Actually, you know, I want that a little bit smaller. It's going to bug me. My diameter was 2 before, so we'll do diameter of 1.75. vertical, -5 inches. There we go. Load. Get rid of that little piece there. Okay, so I have the start of this little light fixture, right? In reality, I probably spend a little bit more time tweaking it. But now we need some materials, so same strategy here. So I'll make a primary layer here that is wall light. We'll call this wall light base, WL base. WL bulb, and WL glass. Okay, and we can delete these extras. Delete them. I want to offset the surface here. I must be able to flip all. There we go. And we're going to do it as 0.125. Oops, distance 0.125 inches. There we go. I wanted that so that I had an actual piece of glass. Okay, so I just wanted to create that like this. So this here is going to be on the glass layer. So let me change object layer, like so. Right. These three are going to be on the wall base layer. Change object layer. And now I still don't have the bulb that's going to be inside, so I probably need to put some kind of a little bulb inside. We'll make something on the simple side, so we don't spend too much time doing this. Center, we'll go a diameter of, I don't know, maybe too big. Do something like that. Okay, so there's the bulb. Change object layer. Okay, so I've got the pieces put together. So now I need to load them in. I need to load materials for them. So if we go to materials, let's load material, and we need something to act as the base. So let's see here. Let's go to some kind of a metal. Oh, let's make it shiny. Why not, right? Well, let's be consistent. We'll use the titanium again. And I'm going to apply that to layer. It's going to be the base. So, okay. Let me load a material. And it's going to be a glass of some kind. And I think I'm going to do a frosted glass. So we'll say, okay, we'll see how this looks. Again, I'm doing this on the fly, so I can't make promises that it's going to be perfect, but we're going to try. And then let me load material, and we need an emissive material. Don't think actually I have an emissive material in here. No, I don't. Let me just check one more thing. Sometimes I save them. No, I don't have an emissive. I should have one. So I'll have to create one. Create material, standard. All right, we're going to call this WL bulb. Notice I'm using a different material, so I have some flexibility in the settings of it. So we'll go WL bulb, and I'll go ahead and say OK. And my color, I have to go back and double check here, is going to be, it's on the website, right? 200 or 155s. Oops, wrong one. Okay, transparency is at 000, that's good. I'm going to create a new emissive, so create layer, emissive. My color of the emissive is going to be 200, 161, 82. 200, 161, 82. Okay, and my transparency, oops, sorry, wrong thing. I have to double check again, is 000. is 0, 0, 0. This was actually supposed to be 100s. So say okay. Okay, so I've got that set up. My intensity, we're going to have to drop up to 100. If I preview it, okay, it looks pretty good. Let me apply this material to layer, and it's going to be the bulb layer. And I'll go ahead and say okay. Okay. Now, there was one thing that I noticed in this file that I do want to clean up, and that is that there was an extra doubled up surface here at the top. There's an extra little surface in there. I just want to get rid of it so it cleans out. Okay. So I have this set up. Looks reasonable. I'm going to go ahead and file save, and we'll go to my 224, and we'll call this wall light, for lack of something better. And I'll click save. Okay, and now I'm going to go back into that scene, which is right here. I'm going to close it, and actually before I get too much further, I'm actually going to save it so that just in case we get a crash here. Okay, so I'm just going to leave this in. That's fine, no problem with that. And now I'm going to go ahead and insert that wall fixture in. So I'll go to Edit Blocks, Insert Block Instance, and I'm going to pick this time the wall light, and I'll go ahead and say Open, and I'll say OK. I'm going to make sure it's embed and link, and I'll say OK. And it's going to ask me, do I want to replace the material or use the existing material? The titanium I used in both places, so I'll just use the existing, or I can replace it. Makes no difference. I'll apply it to the same material, and then we can drop this light fixture into place. So I put it in this upper corner. I'm going to have to do some transformations. Let's move it vertically -2 feet. Let's move it horizontally 4 feet. Sure. Move it a little bit more. 2 feet. Okay, so it's on that edge. Okay, there it is on the wall. If I were to get a view set up and I were to render this, right, we would see the fixture there. We're not seeing too much of the emissive material, probably because it's being covered by this frosted glass right now. Let's get a little bit closer and see whether we can see it inside. Okay, so it is on. That's good. So the emissive's working, but it's not strong enough to come out of the little lens that we have here. Obviously, the titanium's working pretty well. Yeah, there you go. There's the little bulb in there. Looks pretty good. Okay, so now that we have that set up, right, we need to start working with lights. Okay, and the challenges here is that we can't just put our light right inside the existing bulb. It has to be slightly lower than the existing the emissive material bulb, because if it's inside the emissive material, it won't make it outside of that object. So there's a few little quirks that you have to work with. What we're going to do is we're going to create what's called a point light, and it should be right here under point light. And when I click on the create a point light, it's going to say where's the point light location. So I'm going to start by just placing it right here in the center. Okay. One of the weird things about point lights is they can be very hard to select sometimes. Sometimes you just have to kind of work with it and keep rotating your view to actually select it. So I'm going to change that layer to be on light 5. All right, so we'll change object layer. So now it's on light 5. This gives us a little bit more control. Right? In reality, I should probably have a layer called lighting. And we'll take all of these and put them on the lighting layer, which gives me the ability to select them. Okay, so let me work with light 5, which is right here. I'm going to go to properties. I'm going to go to my light, right, and I'm going to go through and do much of the same. Right, I'll say color is going to be that 255, 214, 170. And I'll say okay. My intensity, right, we'll start at maybe 60 watts. We'll see how it turns out. We'll do a radiant power. Inverse square is how we want it set up. Okay, and right now it's right at the bottom of my fixture. So I really would like to push it up inside a little bit more. So let me go to move, vertical, right? And we want to go up a bit, but not so that it's inside of that. So the easiest thing may be to go into wireframe mode so we can kind of see where we are here, right? And we want it to go up inside somewhere like that. Okay? So now we'll take a step back. Let me go into my shaded mode there, and we'll take a render and see how we did. So we're getting a lot of light out of the bottom. The transparent glass isn't doing what we want it to do. So we may have to kind of play around with things a little bit to see if we can get it better. So I think number one, the intensity of the light is too much. So let me go to layers. One of the advantages is I can select objects by layer because I put it on its own layer. And let's change a few things. Let's go down to maybe a 30 watt. Right, inverse square radiant power. Let me make sure I am on correct settings. Okay, that's good. I'm going to go into my layers and temporarily I'm going to hide my... Oh, I didn't apply the glass. There it is. I was wondering what the problem was. So I didn't apply it. So let me go back to my wall light. Right, let me go to my materials. I loaded the frosted glass, but I never applied it. So let me apply material to selection. Oops, excuse me, apply material to layer. Let me apply it to the glass. I'll say OK. And we can actually take a quick look at it here with a render and see, okay, the glass is now transparent, so that's a good thing. Okay. Well, yeah, it hasn't. This is in the this is still in the block, right? But I've saved it. I was just confirming that it did render the way I wanted it to. And let me jump to my night scene, and I'm going to go to Edit, Blocks, Block Manager, and I'll see that linked file is newer. And let's go ahead and update that linked file. Am I still okay using the existing material? Yes, I am. Right? Do I want to replace this? Absolutely, I want to replace this. Let's apply. Okay. We'll close. And let's do another render and see how we did. I'm still struggling with getting that to appear. And why didn't that bring in correctly? Interesting. Interesting. So somehow my glass isn't reading correctly. So, and this is one of the challenges that when you get into lighting, especially when you do semi-transparent stuff, you have to kind of figure that out. Let me keep messing with it a bit to see if we can't sort out what the problem is with that glass. Let me get rid of it. No, it should be. The glass should have loaded in correctly. Let me just double check. Yeah, I mean, it could be, I use this frosted glass, it could be a problem with the glass itself. Let me, okay, so the material's on correctly. This is where you have to keep kind of fussing around with things. We might be getting too much reflection off the interior of the glass, and that might be causing our problem. So let me tweak the material slightly and see if I can fix that problem. Turn back on light 5, and let me turn the glass. Try this now, see if it fixes. If not, I might have to create a different material to emphasize the glass, but let's take a look. Okay, so it's not showing up as frosted as I would like, but I have fixed the, so we're seeing the bulb and we're seeing that kind of glass case around it. That's shining on this wall. We're getting a lot of speckled light, so there's clearly some settings that I have to work with. It has something to do with the way that they created this frosted glass. So the truth being said, I don't know that frosted glass was the right material. I probably need to find a better material to mimic it. But there you go. Now we're seeing it with the glass. I think it's the shadows being cast through however they did the frost to it that's causing this speckle to show up on the wall. Right. Well, the bottom of the light is shining through clean. It's the stuff that's shining through the glass that's causing that shadow. So I'll spend a little bit of time. I don't want to make you keep watching me do it. I'll spend a little bit of time and see if I can figure out a better material for that kind of translucent glass for you. But we can also turn back on. Oh, I should turn on light 1 here, and we can see these together as a scene. So we need a little bit better glow for that, but now you can see it a little bit better. That double shadow is cast by the bottom of the glass, right? Because there's some light getting trapped inside the glass. If we zoomed in, we can see a little bit better. We're also getting some reflection off that titanium. Looks like I turned off the can light, so it didn't render that part of it. But when you get the combination of shadows, you can start to see how this works, right? So the purpose today of 224 is to get familiar with making some basic geometry, right, and then installing it in a scene like this where you have a V-Ray light that is also acting as your light. Okay. There are going to be little quirks about lighting at night. That's always the case. We just have to work through them as you come up with them. Okay. So I'm going to turn you loose now. Start with your geometry. Probably start with something like a can light as kind of a base. It's relatively easy to do. When you do go to post these, make sure you tag the section that'll be on the right about Rhino blocks. Upload your materials and the blocks because somebody else could use the light fixture down the road. Right? If you're not particularly happy with your light or it didn't turn out well, you don't have to include it in the Rhino blocks. You can leave it out. I'm not going to penalize you for that. Obviously, you'll do a rendering of your light fixture itself so that you can see what it looks like in the scene. And if you want to be helpful to somebody that might be using your light, you might say, it works really well with the spotlight with these settings. Can't hurt. Okay? So, I'll turn you loose now. If you have questions, by all means, ask me.
How can you change like different types of light bulbs, fluorescent, LED?
I should look up the setting. I don't off the top of my head have the settings for the other color of light, but I will spend a little bit of time and see if I can find that. Because an LED is a little bit whiter, fluorescent could be a little bit bluer, so I'll try to get those settings and then we'll put them somewhere so you can get them. Halogen, right, a little yellower. So let me work on it. I don't have those off the top of my head. I only have incandescent.